Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray right to the very heart of it. New York, New York. I want to wake up in a city that doesn't sleep and find I'm king of the hill, top of the heap. These little town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it in old New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you. New York, New York. I want to wake up in a city that never sleeps and find I'm a number one, top of the list, king of the hill, a number one. Those little town blues are melting away. I'll make a brand new start of it in old New York. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. It's up to you. New York, New York.
No, it's just music right now. Here we go. So just yes, I'm still moving on.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little verklempt from that song. Great by Daisy Dash, a great cover of New York, New York. I'm a New Yorker, and this class is going to be a very New York theme. Everybody, please put yourself on mute. Okay. So, like I said, that was a very emotional song for me, being a New Yorker, and I'm sure everybody on this call, no matter where you are from the world, is experiencing some kind of sadness, nostalgia, excitement, whatever you're feeling. There's a lot of mixed emotions. And that song, New York, New York, is also in honor of my guest today, or our guest, who's Charles Renfro of Diller Scofidio Renfro. He's waving hi. Hi. Say hi so people can see your face, Charles.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
And Charles has built, and thank you for being here, Charles has designed, actually you told me you can't say built because you're an architect, a builder is a construction person, but you were the architect of some of the most iconic places in New York, including the Highline, which I'm sure, I know you're still in New York, every time you walk out your door and you see the structure that you designed, there must be some, emotional, going on in your heart and soul. But we're going to get to that later in this particular culture class. And now we get to the fun part, consumers. Back to before coronavirus as well. We've been talking a lot about marketing. We've been talking a lot about entertainment and the evolution in terms of using digital. And last week we talked about live events and an artist who did a mural outside Bloomingdale's boarded up walls. But now we're going to talk about permanent space and building, which is the next step. And how are all of us consumers going to socially gather in the future? And so I am excited to have for our Hearts and Minds section, the very accomplished and creative and talented Charles Renfro. Are you there?
Thank you, Brad. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here too. I've known you and your work for a while. It's been so impactful for me and so many people around the world since you have created with your firm such structures all over the world. And I'm just going to zip through this quickly to highlight, of course, the Highline you designed and was the architect of that, the Shed, right? The Broad in LA. But look at all these. Look at all these. What amazing work.
Wow. Oh, you do a better job of navigating my website than I do.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I love this. And you're all over the world.
Yeah.
Here's the road, right? Eco Island and South Sea Pearl. Yeah, and it keeps going and going and going. You know what? I will put it in Slack for everybody so they could explore on their own. But, or not Slack, the chat. That's what I meant. All right. So Charles, thanks for being here.
Sure.
And you are actually where right now?
I'm in my spare room, which is now my office, my guest bedroom, my art room, my storage closet, my gym, and all the other things that you want to hide away from your main space.
And where is that space located? What part?
Oh, I'm in Noche. I think I wrote that on the chat. North Chelsea, Manhattan.
Noche. So you're in New York, and you've been in New York the whole time.
Have been, yeah.
What's that been like emotionally, if you don't mind me getting right to your heart? Seeing the structures like the Highline that are no longer gathering people like they've been doing.
Well, it's certainly surreal. There's no doubt about it. Our cities, whether New York or other places, have been clearly decimated by this pandemic in many, many ways, spiritually and physically. And so surreality is a kind of design strategy that we use in my firm. So in fact, seeing things anew isn't that upsetting to me, but I'd like to understand, the positive things we can draw from this weird time of upside downness and maybe think about some lessons that we can take forward from it. The first thing I'll say is our cities must continue to allow people to gather in order to continue to be cities. And I think society must have cities in order to be a thriving society and an equitable society. Cities are the only place where we can try to achieve equity. So this is a
When you say equity, just everybody is equal and
this is the place we can attempt to start to level the playing field between socioeconomic classes and and I'm gonna get to that in a little bit because I have some very specific thoughts about it related to the pandemic. But the bigger thought is our cities are our engines, our intellectual engines, our pleasure engines, our nourishment engines in every sense of the word. This is where we exchange ideas. This is where we grow ideas. To flee to the suburbs, to assume that you can achieve safety like there are zombies running out and about to attack you like in every kind of apocalyptic movie, by leaving town you'll be safe, is a kind of fallacy. And what we should be doing, I think, is looking around at the city, which is empty, and saying, this is why the city needs to be full. This is what's missing, now. And how can we, now that we have the pause, how can we start to bring our cities back in better ways? And I think that's what I think about when I look out at the city. It's weird and surreal, but it gives us an opportunity to think differently and to act. Okay,
so I'm just going to go right to the jugular.
Yeah.
Are you in more of the intellectual jugular before it was the heart? So now that this has happened and everybody's reconstituting their image of the future of how we're going to connect with people on a social level, if we ever will, did you basically just like rip up all your blueprints of things that you're thinking about designing in the future and starting from scratch now that we have to social distance, or, everybody's talking about how everything's going to change? What's going to happen with architecture?
Well, so I'll just circle back to my first response, which is some things will change, but social gathering will not change, because we as a society will not exist if we cannot socially gather in the future. We have to assume that social gathering will continue in some form. There will be, I think, some adjustments to our everyday lives, but there will not be, as best I can see, adjustments to the kinds of projects which me and my partners make, which are all in the public realm and are all about being together with people in a sea of humanity, whether it's a park, a museum, a performing arts center, or some other kind of public space. That's where we put our money, because we think we want to give architecture to as many people as we can, and we believe that socially gathering is essential, and we have to assume that it will continue. And so, no, we are not ripping up our blueprints. No, we're not thinking that performance halls will seat half of the people that they do now. That would not be a performance hall. That would be a failure. Mm-hmm. Rather than rethinking our projects and ripping up the blueprints for architecture and public space, I think we should be rethinking our medical system, and we should be rethinking medical technology. And it's an easy thing to say, but the truth is, we were wholly unprepared for this pandemic, despite the fact that we had several in the past several decades that should have given us pause and warning. And many of the ways to combat those viruses were the very ones we're using now. So hand washing, distancing, masks. It's likely that those sort of personal PPE measures will remain in place and come and go for the foreseeable future.
When people feel comfortable.
Yes, and the truth is, we are going to continue to see many more communicable diseases come into our lives at a more frequent rate, which just means that our medical systems must be overhauled. We know this now. They must be at a state of readiness to tackle issues that they can't foresee. There needs to be a huge built-in insurance policy that might even involve space making, like hospitals and places that are set aside, like they used to have sanatoriums for tuberculosis patients. And they still social distance tuberculosis patients. That's a practice that continues. Mm-hmm. I think we just have to be prepared to deal with future pandemics that are, already taken out of mainstream, to allow the mainstream to continue to exist, kind of like we've known it in the past, both for our mental and physical health, but also for our economic health.
Are there other opinions in the architectural community? I mean, I don't know how much, you're socializing with them right now on a self-quarantine basis. Are there other architects who have a different point of view that think that, buildings are going to have rooms and wall, because everybody's thinking about reimagining the office space.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to talk about office, and clearly the first public place that we'll probably start going back to is our own offices, and for that reason, there's been a lot of thinking about how to safe the office prior to a vaccine or good treatment, because that's going to happen now. And so definitely there are intermediate concepts about distancing, about taking out communal facilities in the office, about making hands-free restrooms that are going to be implemented right now. In fact, we're outfitting our office this very moment to have those things. There will be things that are integrated into the workplace and into other public places having to do with the mechanical air conditioning systems that introduce new kinds of micron filters that exchange, we'll be exchanging our air much more frequently now because of this, even if we solve the problem with the vaccine or treatment. These are things that will be improved for everyone's good down the road. But the office is the place that's been affected most in another way too. Consider what we're doing right now. We're on a Zoom. I'm sitting in this place, for 15 hours a day. I think my internet might be going spotty. Just warning.
Yep.
So
we got you.
Today. Okay. So, but the forced at gunpoint use of these business socialization tools has made us realize that they actually do work to cover a lot of territory. And in fact, they make working with people in faraway places so much easier that the future of the office itself is just in question in totality. Meaning, most companies will immediately realize that they don't need as much office space as they do. They will allow people to be working from home, that offices will downsize, and guess what? That's going to leave millions of square feet of empty office spaces, and dozens and dozens of developers and owners, hundreds and hundreds, let's just say in New York alone, clamoring for new rent and tenants. And so here's one takeaway that I'm going to offer, which is, imagine if we look at the two problems. One is empty office space, and then we think about inequity and everybody having left New York because it's gotten so expensive. And my assertion that cities must and will remain the heartbeat of culture. If we think about ways to reimagine office buildings to be mixed use, from every floor, with housing and office.
Oh, cool.
And you bring in new ways of ventilating, opening windows. You've got to change the zoning. You've got to change the codes. You've got to change, a lot of things at a whole bunch of different levels. And this could happen very quickly. And it really might instrumentally change the equity of our cities, allowing lots of affordable housing to be made. And everybody has to cooperate, though. And so this is my Pollyanna take on the moment, which is to say there are fringe benefits to this. We don't need to be acting in fear. I'm not tearing up my blueprints for my public work, which doesn't, they're years out in the future. Mm-hmm. But I am realizing that the way that we manage office culture from a spatial point of view will forever be altered. And that presents opportunities.
And what would you say now that there will be more equity, right? Yep. And we've been seeing in the last decade or more this exodus of artists in the city and having to, move, I don't know, miles and miles and miles away. And, now they're actually probably grateful that they don't have to commute 2 hours or more every day to go into the city. We've been, many of my friends and peers are like, there's no life, there's no culture anymore in Manhattan. We have to go out to Brooklyn. Is that something that you've been hearing for the last 10 years as well, and something that could change?
Of course it is. When we started thinking with the city of New York about the shed in Hudson Yards, we had imagined that it might be one way to reinvent culture and the way it's presented and the way artists are scene in New York City. There's a residency program for hundreds and hundreds of artists that have not had the luxury of having museum shows, et cetera. I mean, you may think it's an elitist institution because it's sitting in the middle of Hudson Yards, but it's not. It's actually it's very much about making equity in the neighborhood. The people that live in the low income housing are brought in for education programs and to have jobs there. I mean, we actually have been thinking about these problems through our work. And so, yes, we have been trying to deal with it. And going to Brooklyn is still being in New York City. I think the bigger issue is well, I have a bunch of friends that moved to Hudson, let's say. And Hudson, is actually starting to look like, New York used to look. There's great restaurants, but there's farm to table and you can be outdoors, and there's actually culture, and there's performance, and there's art shows. And so, there may be a kind of equalization of urbanities around, but I think we shouldn't say that that's going to save or solve the condition of urbanity in New York in particular from itself. And I do think coronavirus is one of the things that's going to help New York get saved, because all those people are leaving and offices are changing, and it allows us to rethink from a policy and architecture standpoint the way the city is made and who makes it up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then we're seeing all these stories, and I think somebody in the chat said this too, but I was thinking about that, how New Yorkers, now that we could work remotely, are leaving New York because of this experience, as well as people in Silicon Valley or who are living in San Francisco or thinking of living in other places. Because it's been really expensive and they were forced to live in these areas because they had to be close to their jobs. But do you think there's going to be, an exodus outside of these cities for a little bit?
I think because the workplace is getting reinvented as we speak and as we sit here on this Zoom call, there will be a fluidity about where you're positioned, and you won't be tethered to your city for work. I think the thing that will tether people to cities are, some people for work, of course, people in the entertainment industry, people in the hospitality industry. Those are things that really depend on a large congregation of people to work as a business enterprise. And so I think, you'll still see people living in cities because that's where you get to do things. That's where you get to go to Broadway or try a new restaurant every single night if you want to do that. If you do that. But people that are here strictly for their jobs, that's maybe going to change a little bit, and that's exactly why I think that there may be the ability to re-level the city for those residents that want to be here. People who want to be here might actually be able to be here.
Mm-hmm. Is it going to take a while, you think?
So this is a utopian pie in the sky concept, right? Yeah. So it's going to take some time. We should start your question of the day, which is, are we going back to BC?
Yeah. Thank you for going back to that theme. Thank you.
Are we going to do, PBC, post pre-corona?
AC.
Whatever it is after Corona. AC. Thank you. Anyway, but it seems to me that we would just be, it would be such a shame to not think about positives that could be wrenched out of this time. We certainly have to think about negatives, and that's why I harp on the idea of the medical industry needing to change, and we all know that it goes without saying. But there are positives that can happen, and if we don't start working on them now, then how will we even know, and how will we, it might take time, but I think we're going to be able to move some things forward. I'm trying to organize a kind of think tank, hopefully with the AIA New York, American Institute of Architects, to try to bring together, urbanists, policymakers, sociologists, architects, designers, city planners, to rethink the city as a kind of ecosystem that I think humanity must have to continue to move forward.
That's sweet. So, Charles, so I talked to you about this before. There's so many great questions, but I do have to pause because I told everybody in the beginning that I was going to tell them about the future of culture class,
Please do.
which I've been doing for 10 weeks for free, as everybody knows. And moving forward, for the next 10 weeks, I've decided in addition to the premium classes, as well as the custom corporate classes that I do, I'm going to start charging. I know it's been so hard for me to actually talk about this, but this is my life's work. And I hope that you're all inspired by it. I'm so grateful for this community. So starting June 3rd, I've actually decided to do another 10 classes, but doing it all within a summer semester course fee, which would be 10 classes. I'm going to tell you the amount. It's $179, and here are just the 3 packages. And then if you don't want to do all 10 classes, each class is going to be $20. So I hope that is affordable. If it's not right now, because I know it's crazy times, email me directly, brad@siteguy.com, because the worst thing I would want to do is lose any of you, because the purpose of this is for us all to be inspired to reinvent the future together. So that's my little pitch that I haven't done for 10 weeks. I didn't know where this would go, but everybody's been asking me to continue this. So this is what I have to do. So I love you, and I hope you could continue with the next 10 weeks. So thank you. Back to Charles.
Brad, I see that a lot of people have sent in a lot of interesting questions. Yep. So
do you want to kind of pick them?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Let me just read through some of them. And if you see any, Brad, that you would like me to address, please do so. There's a question about the smart city, which I find interesting. As you all know, this the smart city that Alphabet was working on with the city of Toronto was canceled last week. And that if you don't know about that, it was fairly controversial, but also fairly ambitious utopian project where an entire portion of the city was going to be interconnected. Internet of Things would be working on everything from a street light to a dishwasher. They all speak to each other and they know what to do. The streets could change dimensions. They could let cars go this way or that way depending on desire. You can see one of the issues with that immediately, and that is that Big Brother is watching all the time, everywhere. We were sort of involved in this in a certain way in one of the culture projects there, and I had an issue with the smart city exactly for the reasons of equity, and because like McDonald's, there would be a McDonald's there in the the Harborside, I forget what it's called, city. Yet where are the workers that are there that likely couldn't afford to be in their wired up home, and the issues like that kept bothering me about the smart city. And so the death of that Toronto city during this pandemic, I think partly as a result of the pandemic, of course, because there was no economic imperative, but also because I think people have started to become wary of technology in their everyday lives. And we need to pull back and choose where we want our technology to enter into our spatial condition. I think
and by whom as well.
Yes, and by whom. Correctly, exactly right. And I think you were talking about that earlier, Brad, about the large tech companies just swallowing up their competition, and we've lost our ability to control to a large degree. And people think China is scary in terms of the way technology traces your every move, but it happens here too. And it can, and it probably should. And I think one of the reasons that contact tracing wasn't done here so quickly is probably because the government didn't want to tip its hand that it had access to every single person's cell phone and could figure out if you were sick. I'm sounding a little paranoid, but the truth is technology is sort of with us. and it's not announced that way. But anyway, the smart city, I think, is going to be rebooted, and hopefully we as consumers will have more to say about how we engage the smart city. That's one question that I thought was interesting.
Just to review, the smart city, for those of you who haven't heard the term, because we haven't heard it in a really long time, is having technology to automate certain things around the city that will, help everything become more smoothly. Is that a good definition, Charles, or would you add to that?
Oh, I was reading the notes. Say it again.
I was just defining the smart city.
Smart city.
Yeah, for the people who don't know.
Oh, what did you say? Let me see. Hear it again. Sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. That's okay. Just, using technology to automate things that are happening around the city, so that things are easier in terms of moving around. Traffic lights are automated to cars going down. There's the smart cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in a
Cool.
way, it's a concept about sustainability and efficiency, that energy would be used evenly throughout the day. So therefore there wouldn't be surges. And the way that you would do that is you'd manage large buildings, air conditioning systems, that you could reuse the partially cooled air from an office building in a residential, or that there would be an exchange, which may make things really efficient. That was a good side of the smart city.
Right.
But in so doing, every single person must be part of the network and be connected, and therefore monitored, controlled, and managed. And that was just a little bit scary. But yeah, it has its roots in a good place. Mm-hmm. So just to say, I'm not completely against it. How should we all be paid? Could you say how should all be paid? Never mind. Let's see. There's a lot about exodus from the city, and I think we talked about that. I think there will be less people in the city due to jobs, and I think there'll be more in the city from desire to be in the city if we can expand our ability to make affordable housing for them all, and that's something I'm going to be working on.
And so let me ask you a question. In terms of what you are working on right now, are there any exciting projects that we should know about and look forward to?
Of course there are. What do you think?
Yeah, tell us. Or what are you most excited about?
So I'm going to say something that ties back into one of the first comments you made in this class, which is China. Despite the supposition that we might have lost our trade with China, we've won two brand new projects during quarantine.
Oh wow!
And they're both in China, and they're both exciting public space projects that are all about public gathering, so I find, say what you will about conspiracy theories, why China all of a sudden has the money, time, the non-corona to emerge and to start hiring us again is very interesting and fascinating. You can speculate.
Even the CEO of direct-to-consumer Disney.
Yeah, but another thing I'm going to say, it's not to say that these are the most amazing projects that we're working on, but simply to say this is one of the most amazing circumstances under which to have gotten these projects, and therefore I find it fascinating. Second thing to say is China, as you may know, has built culture centers all over their country, hundreds. A Lincoln Center in every town over 1 million people. There's 68 Lincoln Center-sized facilities around China. What are they filling those things with? Who's going to watch the shows and who's putting the shows on? Well, guess what? And we're working on a couple of them. So that this is sort of by way of saying what's exciting. These are interesting. And the fact that coronavirus is likely to decimate our arts industry for some time, while I do think people will get together in a performance hall, I think the performing arts as we know it right now is going to change. And I think that China may actually pick up the slack and start hiring our performing artists and our visual artists to take up the space in those empty culture centers. And with that, I think I'm going to leave you to it.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, the last thing is that we are all from different industries here. A lot of marketers, a lot of people from consumer-facing businesses, media, architecture. Is there one life lesson now that you can delineate for us in terms of us being from all different industries, and how can we all connect over an idea that you've been thinking about?
This is a surrogate social space that you've constructed, Brad, and I think it's been very successful. I've attended several of these, and I love the positivity that everybody brings to the table. You can see it in the chats. But what it says to me is that people are anxious to be back together, and that we as as citizens, not citizens, that's not the right word, as bodies and beings, we thrive and we depend on each other, or we must have each other. That's what has distinguished this species over all others, is our ability to be together, to negotiate, to socialize, to communicate. And I think that this time apart has made us realize how important it is that we work together well. And that is a slightly politically loaded question, because I think that we're seeing in many instances around the world issues where that is not the direction that we're headed. So I think that this time has got to realign us all together to be where we have been, cooperative and all working together.
And going back to the thing that we were talking about in the beginning, it's time to reboot humanity. And that's really the core.
That's right.
So thank you, Charles, for being here. Thank you, everybody. So by the way, next week, the class is also free. So come for that one. We're starting June 3rd, but we have some really exciting guests. I told you about Vivian Howard, the chef, Kate Byer, the psychiatrist and the psychopharmacologist. And then I am really excited to have Cindy Gallup of Make Love Not Porn. And she's an activist and really has, what she says, I'm the Michael Bay of the advertising business, because she just blows shit up and really has been so instrumental in making the business less misogynistic. So keep coming, please. I love Culture Class. I love all of you. And I hope we could continue learning together, staying culturally relevant, and thinking about reinventing the future in a positive way. See you all next week.
Bye, everyone.